The modern city, a hard, unforgiving place, cramped, ordered, stifling. A place that increasingly restricts where we go and what we do. A place that, especially for young people, threatens to limit freedom and creativity. But does it have to be that way?
I thought parkour was a very underground, very urban sport, something that young people could relate to and do.
I was just watching TV and this thing came on, jump London and jump Britain.
I jump around anywhere I can.
Get the legs up.
It's hard, you know.
Okay, and you are in this position.
I get interested in it, but we're like a bit embarrassed maybe to do it outside. So this will like help us to get out there more experience, so we know that we can do it outside and not get embarrassed.
For many practitioners, especially in the UK, Jump London and Jump Britain were integral to their introduction of parkour. But the sound bites you just heard were from another documentary called Jump Westminster. This came out in 2008 and was actually quite overlooked. It was directed and produced by Julie Angel, someone I've already showcased on this podcast before. She did such a good job on this documentary. Very rarely seen nowadays, it takes the time to talk to a range of people within the community. The coaches, the PE teachers, the community figureheads, and of course, the kids. You even get a glimpse of a enthusiastic and younger looking Eugene Minogue, who went on to become the CEO of Parkour UK, our national governing body for the sport. For episode 35 today, I've been commissioned by Parkour UK's new CEO, Dan Newton, to conduct an interview with Stephen Mitchell, who was the Chair of Parkour UK whilst Eugene was in office. Stephen, or more commonly known as Mitch, has been behind the scenes in Parkour UK for 9 years and is coming to the end of his term. I wanted to find out what his thoughts were on leaving Parkour UK, how he's felt his term has gone, what he sees for the future, and how parkour has affected him along the way. Through conversations like this one, I want to help try and bridge that gap between the structured and unstructured community in parkour. We've got a long way to go, and we can't just jump off walls all the time. We need to think about deeper issues and ways in which we can help the sport grow and engage more people. So I know it's been a while, but relax. Listen in. The weather's good. Things are good. We're back. This is episode 35 with Mitch. Okay, and we are back. It's been a while. This is an interesting one. This is a new one. I'm doing this podcast in association with Parkour UK. Very privileged to do so. I have someone in front of me that I've never met before. I don't really know much about him. So a big welcome, Mitch. Thank you so much for coming on.
Sam, good morning. Nice to meet you. And yeah, delighted to meet you virtually for the first time and try and pen some of my thoughts of the last decade of being involved in the parkour community in the UK.
Now that's not a insignificant amount of time. That's been a long time. Does it feel like a long time?
Yeah, it does when I look back, and as you and I have spoken this week about the questions that you wanted to ask and the things to talk on, and I've been talking to Dan over the last few months because July 2021 will be my last kind of formal involvements with the sport and the community in the UK. And yes, it is pretty much just over 10 years since Eugene and a mutual friend of ours approached me and took me out for a beer in Tottenham Court Road and said, Mitch, we need to build a governing body for parkour and free running. We need someone that kind of knows the landscape and has been around a bit and is reasonably well connected. Do you fancy coming and helping out? 10 years on, with all sorts of amazing things and bumps in the road and things that have gone on in the way, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a minute. It's been a great journey, there's loads of stuff to look back on. In many ways, I guess in a parallel to my life, both professionally and at home, there's been all sorts of significant changes there for me. So yes, it's played a massive part in the last decade of everything I've been involved in.
And going back to that meeting then with Eugene with a few beers and stuff, what was your early understandings of parkour? You know, what was your impression? Had you heard of it before? Was it something completely new to you? How did you respond to that kind of idea when you first had those initial talks?
Yeah, so I guess there's two bits here, really. There's the piece around governance and being involved in a board or taking responsibility for an organisation, and absolutely the bit about the community. So I'd never, I was just embarking on my first board role with Active Essex, which is the active partnership for Greater Essex. But I was 32. I hadn't got any other kind of board responsibilities or experience. I was working in the public sector. I'd never been a company director. I didn't really understand the whys and wherefores of that. So there was part of me that there was a load of hares racing around. What does that mean and what does that involve? Which was, I guess, a whole set of challenges and experiences that I hadn't, never done before, but was keen to do. And I think if you look at some of the most successful people in life and in society, they do have a kind of portfolio approach to what they do. They absolutely have a day job and a function and things that pay the bills, but they then give back or they contribute through other means. And if you look at the kind of Japanese Ikagi proverb, and where you get your kind of sweet spot, right? It's you need to find stuff that drives your economic engine. You need to find stuff that gives you peace and happiness in here, and you need to find stuff that allows you to feel that you are contributing to other people. And so that governance journey and that directorship and stuff was one that I hadn't experienced. From a parkour community perspective, I'd known Eugene for many years. I was well aware of, I guess, what the community had been doing from the original documentaries around Jump Westminster and Jump London. And having been involved in grassroots sport in London as my day job, we had supported parkour activities to take place. We had begun to scope out where and how that could happen. Now, I wasn't directly involved, and as you will all recognise, and I think the community recognising, those first roots were really planted in Westminster. But I wasn't walking in completely blind, but I was walking in as someone that had played rugby all my life, had been very lucky as a young person to play lots of sports. So I guess I far better understood mainstream, traditional, team-based, train here, play here, be a member, seasonal, all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, at the time, it was kind of this, why not? Like, why not push yourself out into out of your comfort zone into something that you're unfamiliar with? And those early days, certainly with Eugene by my side, it felt like a journey that we could go on together.
Wow, interesting. Yeah, I guess some of those documentaries really were key in the sort of the flourishing of parkour, especially in London. So you kind of jumped on that wave, in a sense. And how do you feel about the sport as a whole? Do you feel part of the sport? Do you feel that it's something that you? Because you've already given out the proverbs there, which is really nice. Does the philosophy of parkour kind of speak to you as well, like kind of some of the original kind of thoughts behind the movement?
Yeah, absolutely. As I said, as a youngster, I grew up playing lots of things, but also I grew up in a society where I was exploring, playing, jumping, climbing in my local community. And I guess there was always a thing that Eugene and I, or Eugene taught me that used to make you chuckle, is like when you met people that were kind of like, oh, parkour's jumping off buildings, right? Like, well, no, so let's have a conversation about this because we need to bust that myth.
Yes.
But most importantly, when did you stop doing it? That was always his thing that kind of stopped people in their tracks, because they're like, what do you mean? I said, well, when did you stop, like, having a little race with somebody, or when did you stop moving a different way or exploring a different route to get from A to B, or just climbing and playing? And when you explain to people, and that's the bit, I guess, where I certainly, I don't know whether I feel part of the community, but I certainly feel connected to the community. Those are some of the proudest moments I've had, is almost having those conversations with people that came into a conversation thinking, you guys hang off cranes, right? It's like, no, just give me 5 minutes and explain these kind of things. And that's where, as I said, and again, the balance here, right? I have been independent chair of the governing body. I haven't been an elected chair, so I haven't come from the community. And in my opinion, I shouldn't come from the community. But I have an awareness of, an engagement with, a passion for everything that the community has stood for. So I think it would be, and that's been a difficult balance to tread across that 10 years, because like I'm often been seen as an outsider, but actually there's so many times when we've gone out to bat that people would just never realise what those kind of things were, and those the moments in time that we'll talk about in a minute, to give the sport and the community a legitimacy in this country that I don't believe without Parkour UK it would never have. It would never have the ability to go into schools, to go and work with SEMH children, to go and be used as a diversionary tactic for crime and antisocial behaviour, to be used in performance sport, to be used for older people or for inclusion or for mental health. So all of those things and the use of sport, regardless of what that sport is, are passions of mine. So the fact that parkour can traverse that really neatly and has some amazing people that do just brilliant things using it as a tool for betterment is the sweet spot for me.
Yeah, and so I guess on my behalf, thank you for having those talks and trying to debunk. Do you feel that over this sort of decade that you've seen a change in attitude towards parkour from the public and from an outside kind of perspective?
Yeah, I think there's been a massive change, Sam, if I'm honest. And I think, but only the beginning of the sea change that we and the new organisation, or the evolved organisation, I should say, that we're creating aspires to do. Without a doubt, in the circles and the spheres that I operate professionally and in my other NED roles, people far better understand what it is than they did 10 years ago. I think in society we've got a long way to go, because there is still that myth about it is the guys from Storror doing those leaps in Bristol, it is the crazy stuff that you see in London on the underpasses. But actually at its basic core, it's something fundamentally that we all do, we all should continue to do, and we should all embrace. And when we set out to write our first strategy, the whole idea was making parkour a social norm. And again, these aren't my words, this was certainly Eugene's driver. His passion was to say, when someone cycles past you or runs past you, you don't take any notice now, it's just normal. So why shouldn't it be that when a group of people are practicing parkour or free running, why should we stop and point? Why should we stop and stare? So creating this kind of movement discipline as a societal norm is one that I stood square behind. And I think we've made massive strides. And I think you only need to look at the growth of the community in terms of both formal and informal, the number of companies, the number of coaches, the number of places that parkour is being delivered, the number of parks that have been established. Like, if you charted that over the last decade, it's been phenomenal. Now, a lot of you, the practitioners, have been there in that decade. I hope and feel you see that as well. But certainly from, the outsider's perspective, I am absolutely confident that we are in a far better place now than we were. There is still a whole load of stuff to do and a whole number of myths to bust, and some of the challenges that we've been through in some of the cities where parkour has been prohibited and all that kind of stuff, the positive trespass, that's the stuff that we're beginning to now be able to resource and have those conversations, which we were always doing piecemeal, part-time, voluntarily for, 8 years of my 10-year tenure.
And this is something that we've talked about on the podcast before, actually, this sort of idea that how do we actually portray parkour as practitioners in the community? Because, like you said, there's huge, titans like Storror who produce regular content and a lot of quite jaw-dropping stuff, and then obviously you have other figures in the community like Dom and others that regularly do incredible things. And it's sort of a toss-up, because you want to show these things, you want to show what the human body can do, but at what point does that actually detract or sort of deter beginners from practicing the sport? 'Cause they think, I'll never get there. And also, how much does that actually contribute to the myths that, you know, parkour is just jumping off? Because if that's what you see all the time, you know, all the viral stuff, then that, in a way, yeah, this is almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like, how do we? It's quite a tricky one that I've been talking through with different guests. I don't know what you think about that, but.
Yeah, so Sam, as I understand it, the practitioners and the members of the community that I've met and got to know over the last decade, those things do not happen without hours, days, years of practice and not perfectionism, but being able to land those movements, right? That's one of the big things. So I think, although the content from those people that you've mentioned and plenty of others is stuff that people want to consume, I think we could do a lot more, and I think they could do a lot more to show what's gone on to get to that point. The bumps, the falls, the getting it wrong.
Yeah.
Because, again, when I explain parkour to people in free running in this kind of sports development circles, when you say, oh, people are doing that jump, you realise the only reason they do that jump is they have practiced that jump 100 times at ground level. And they won't go to height until they've done it 100 times and landed it 100 times. Now, I've never seen that in practice, but that's what people have told me, right? So I trust that that's what's happened. And I trust that Dom and the Storer boys and Jim, all these guys, they are practicing stuff. And it's only about the mind-body bit when you take it to height, right? So I think there could be a lot more done to say, like, this stuff is beautiful, like, this stuff is magic, this stuff is inspiring. But by the way, a bit like an elite performer on any level, we're about to walk into an Olympic and Paralympic few weeks where we're going to be celebrating, but actually the stories behind that, the journey to get to doing the piece that Dom did 3 or 4 weeks ago in London, right? the Storer boys on the Bristol steps, like, years, hours, days of practice and hurt and pain and enjoyment and character building stuff and getting it wrong and again, I've got to know some of the community better, so that, like, when I watch some of the stuff that Scott Jackson puts out just about him practicing it, like the story of him, he's never been able to do this particular thing, he's then cracked it because he tried it 3 years ago and he couldn't do it, and then the kind of the outpouring of content, love, happiness, emotion for someone cracking those, and that's the bit that we should celebrate. But actually, those things, those moments, winning an Olympic 100 meters, yeah, everyone said, but actually, did you know the tears and the tantrums and the fallouts and the shin grazes and the broken bones, or whatever those things might be? And again, let's not pretend that parkour is not averse to that. Like, people do get hurt, absolutely, they do break bones, they do damage themselves, they do get scuffs and what have you, but that's life, right? That's about growing, that's about learning by doing. So yeah, absolutely, I think there is, to try and answer the question, that content is absolutely brilliant, but that, I think, is as much a hindrance for us as it is a great development tool, because you then get the kind of misnomer from other people is, oh, someone's now going to go to Bristol and try and jump over those things because they saw the Storer boys do it. Like, you don't just do that. That is years of practice and dedicating, and it's not like, yes, the boys aren't getting out with a tape measure, right? But they are understanding what's around them. They are understanding their environment. They're understanding what it needs to take to go from 1 to 2 to 3 and whatever it was, the 40 steps or what have you. So yeah, I think we need to find that balance. We should absolutely be showcasing the best content and the most incredible movement, but we should show the story that sits behind it.
I agree, yeah, and it's something that I kind of tried out recently. I got an arm jump that I'd been looking at for several years, and I have used that clip in a big video in York, and people commented on stuff like that, and people kind of realised it was a big thing for me. But then I found all the other clips and put them together and showed the process, and I was speaking more about the process about it. And I think that, yeah, it was interesting how some, in quotes, non-parkour people found it interesting to see that, because yeah, how do you go from starting a session, as your same physical self, and by the end of the session you've done something you've never done before? You're still the same self, but you've something's changed in your mind or however it is. And so I went into that process a little bit. So I totally agree. I think there's a huge space for this almost behind the scenes kind of process, kind of explanation, and there's a huge space. So people listening, let's see how you got to those jumps, how you cracked those jumps and overcame the barriers. That'd be great to see more of.
Rough with the smooth, sweet with the sour. Tell the story.
Yeah.
I'm running a kind of leadership group as part of my non-parkour roles around failure and humility and compassion, and it's incredible how at the moment in the last 12 months there have been a number of brands and entrepreneurs and people that have started to say, I got things wrong. And I don't mind admitting I got things wrong, and that's in life, in business, in relationships, in education. It's everything. But I think we could tell that story better.
Yes, yeah, kind of celebrating our being vulnerable to show our failures and show what it takes and what you have to go through. Because people can everyone can relate to that. And so looking back over these 9 years, then what stands out to you? What are the key moments for you that you and maybe some of these are kind of less positive moments, but what stood out for you over the last kind of 9 years? Thinking back.
Yeah,
easy question.
I think well, there's so much to go at. Listen, the single biggest thing that we have achieved as a community, and that I have been hugely proud to be part of, is receiving recognition. And the recognition journey was brutal. And again, people will never truly understand what went on behind the scenes to get there. But I think as a staging post globally for parkour to ultimately be recognised and legitimised as a sport and an activity and a discipline and a movement, and Parkour UK to be the first recognised national governing body, is something that everybody should be inherently proud of. But I am super proud of, because the system, as I will talk about, put as many barriers as possible in the way to try not to let us in. And there is a whole series of stuff in there, right? There's the gymnastics piece, there's the non-traditional piece, there's the risk-benefit piece, there's the who are these young upstarts piece, there's the societal norms. What do you mean you don't train twice a week? And if you don't train twice a week, you don't play at the weekend. So I have loved the elements of that journey that got us to that point. And as I say, nobody will ever really know, but that I think as something that we should all be hugely proud of, is probably the single biggest thing. And the legitimacy, the respect, the funding, the being allowed to do stuff that we weren't allowed to do before, should never be underestimated. And absolutely, there are some similar big decisions to come, and there will be people that I'm sure will say, why did you bother? What was the point in doing that? But actually, I think if you look back at the natural lineage of every sport in society, and we're going to have this, you're going to have this conversation about competition, there'll be some people that stand over here and say, we don't want it, we're purists. And there'll be some people that stand over here and say, we want to create a competitive structure or some kind of team or competition piece. And that's natural evolution. But we've always said from day one, and Eugene and I, or Eugene ingrained it in me, and I hope I've ingrained it in the community, is that this governing body is community-led. It's not about Parkour UK. It's not about systems and structures and building massive teams. This is about what the community want. And we've built, and listen, it has not been without its road bumps, and there's people that have thrown stones and will continue to throw stones, I'm sure, and people that didn't like things along the way and have loved things along the way, and people that thought we should have done things differently. I get all of that. But ultimately, no sport has been through that process in the last 20 years. So we've done that. And no sport had done it anywhere else in the world, and we did that first. And again, Parkour Earth and Damien and the team have got major challenges in place, but we've set the precedent for building that. Parkour Earth is built in the same shape, form, governance structure as Parkour UK. And there's bits of mess going on globally, right? And it's not my role to comment or to pass judgment, but ultimately a strong international federation is built on strong national federations, and it's built for the right reasons with the community. It's not built for commercial gain, and it's not built to try and just get to the Olympics. That's nonsense. So I stand by, and I say that our proudest achievement should be and will always be the recognition piece as a sport and as a governing body.
And for those listening, can you just quickly differentiate between Parkour UK and Parkour Earth for those that don't know?
So Parkour UK is the UK recognised national governing body for parkour and free running. And to do that, we had to go through this recognition process, which is basically asking permission and defining what our sport was, who we represent, what the fundamental aspects of it are, and how we're going to govern it. Parkour Earth is the international federation that has been built using the Parkour UK model to try and create the international federation. And international federations then have the opportunity to do lots of things internationally, to advocate, to lobby, to perhaps build competition if they want to raise standards, to connect learning and to share best practice, but also to be the custodians of the sport. And that comes at times with a heavy weight. And that's where the differentiator is, in simple terms, Parkour UK is the UK-wide governing body. Parkour Earth is the international federation. No different to the FA and FIFA, ECB and the ICC, British Gymnastics and our friends at FIG.
Friends indeed, yeah. I can imagine there's been a lot of turbulence behind the scenes that the community won't know about. And this is something that's really interesting in, I guess, what Parkour UK and people like Dan are speaking about in trying to connect and link and help understand the unstructured community and the structured community. Even this podcast, I feel like, is a bit of a link between the two, because, you know, people like yourself I've never spoken to before, and I'm kind of, you know, in the scheme of things, a street rat. So so it's really nice to kind of have these conversations. Have you found that you must have met some very interesting characters along the way, I imagine? Has being involved in this world, has it changed has it affected you personally, as in like kind of how you go about life? I know we kind of touched on that before, but seeing these kind of incredible things and being very close to some of the best talent in the world, has it affected you on a sort of personal level as well?
Absolutely. I've met some wonderful people. I've met some committed, dedicated, passionate, enthusiastic people. I've met some people that don't have those values either along the way. But what I have done is I've tried to always give my time. I've tried to always take a piece of learning from people. And absolutely, I play this back to the personal journey, right? So in the last 10 years, I have become a father to 3 daughters, of whom I am incredibly proud. Like, we do parkour on the way to school because they just play and they climb over the walls and they climb up the steps and they go through the gaps in the railings. And listen, it's not parkour according to the purists. They're playing, they're moving, so... would I have had that outlook on life? Perhaps yes. Would it have been so? Would I have been such an advocate for it? Probably not. So there's that element of it. It has made me look at traditional sport in a different way, and we don't get it, or we don't always get it right in this country, and I think globally. And does a modern sport offer in a local community truly represent and reflect the society it's trying to engage? I'm not sure it does. And that's where the informal, the fun, the social, the pop up when you can, play when you can, move when you can, and you don't need to ask permission, and you don't need to join a group, and you don't have to attend a session. That's societally reflective. Like, you guys, your generation and the generations pre and post you in terms of the parkour community have grown up trying to shape a different narrative. And I think that's fascinating. And that's helped me shape a different narrative, not just on my life, but absolutely the little bits of stories and the connections that I've been able to make behind the scenes that have allowed conversations to happen absolutely are based on the learning of meeting, greeting, seeing the power and action of what the community can do. And as I said, that's not always been unequivocally in the right direction and alongside my value set. But for the majority of time, for the majority of people, it has been a brilliant personal experience. And it has definitely shaped how I will be a father, and how ultimately I will try and apply what I've learnt in everything that I do now moving forward. Absolutely.
It's funny. I was waiting in a queue the other day, and there's a lady on the phone, and she was quite flustered, and she had like a little boy with her, and he was next to some bike racks, and he just, without any sort of thought, he just went over to them and started hanging off them, and was saying, look what I can do, I can hang off them. And she was kind of very flustered. She was on the phone, and it was just she saw it and immediately just completely shut him down. What are you doing? Get off there immediately. Quite severe. And it was it's just, I guess, it's sad to me seeing this so commonly, how much stress and pressure is placed on play. From he was about 3, 4 or something like that. And those early messages surely are gonna feed into the rest of his life, and those sort of things that play is wrong, that play is necessarily bad, which is a great shame to me. And I think that for me, that is something that comes inherently with parkour, is that it gives you the open door to play as an adult. You're allowed to play. It's like it's okay. You can do that. And yes, for the moment, maybe it does look quite strange for a lot of people on the street to see this. But I hope, like you said before, that it does become more normalised. And in the same way that, I've spoke about this a little bit before, in the same way that things like yoga and mindfulness and even things like cold water therapy and martial arts, these are all huge kind of waves in our culture at the moment, and I hope that parkour can find its way in there and be as normal. I'm still trying to figure out exactly how to help do this, but I guess conversations like this and being proud of parkour, I think not shying away of what it means to you, and also not shying away from explaining, what it is in quite a factual, serious way. It doesn't have to be humiliated. That there's more than enough talent that's gone on across the world over the last 20, 30 years, which legitimizes it for me, essentially.
And Sam, listen, the way I've always understood parkour as someone that grew up in the 80s, is that there was a culture associated with skateboarding back then that if you were skateboarding, you were probably smoking dope. If you were smoking dope, you were probably drinking. And if you were doing those two things, you were probably spitting at Mrs. Moggins when she walked past you in the street because you were just disrespectful. Now, as I understand it, the discipline and the resilience and the art form of parkour means that you're all prepared to have those conversations. So let's say you're outside the library and Mrs. Moggins says, I really don't want you doing that here. I understand that you won't spit at her, you won't swear at her, you'll say, hi Mrs. Moggins, great to meet you. What am I doing that's offensive? Do you not like me practicing here? I'm just playing. Now, Have I ever seen that play out in practice? No. I trust that that's how we go about it. And I know there are absolutely times when I'm sure the community have been challenged by people that are saying, don't do that here, we don't want that here, you're not allowed to do that, get out of the way, you're creating a nuisance. I'm not, just playing. And again, whether I, through my native tongue of traditional sports development, explain this elsewhere, rightly or wrongly, this whole piece around when you're looking at a monument or a bridge or something to climb on, you don't all look at it as, oh, that's really nice, we should walk round it. Like, you want to get on it and touch it and feel it and play, and not play with it, but like, you want to look at it from a different perspective. That's fine. Like, we should embrace that. We shouldn't societally be saying, how dare you do that? Actually, but that shouldn't then go, oh, he's doing parkour. And again, we've had so many problems. The young man that tragically died on the metro in France was doing parkour. He wasn't doing parkour. He was actually, at the time, I think, and I know his mum had set up the kind of parkour parents piece, he was just being a bit of a doofus. He was doing something a little bit stupid and a bit reckless. But nowhere in the parkour rulebook did it say, do that. And nowhere where individuals from the community hanging on a crane with one arm does it say, that's parkour. But in the same way as if that young lad played football, it doesn't say footballer dies on the metro being a dick, it says parkour athlete dies. No, like, what are you talking about? The fact that he goes to a parkour club, like, he goes to school probably, he's from Hastings, bloke from Hastings dies on the, well, which headline do you want to make? And that doesn't do us any favours, right? Because, I don't think we practice it, I don't think we prophesise about it, and I say we as in the community. I don't think people go up there and say, I'm doing parkour hanging on a crane, I'm doing parkour by doing something stupid or reckless or more risky than the mainstream general public. But we just get tarnished with it, and we've had to go out to battle loads of times to say, take that headline down. That headline is wholly inappropriate because that isn't parkour. You're just sensationalizing it for the sake of it.
And are any...
Sorry, that was a bit of a tangent.
No, absolutely. It's interesting. Are there any of those situations that you would have managed differently?
Not when we went out to bat for the community. No, I don't think so. I can't recall anything where we have stood up for what the community were trying to do or what they believed in, where we've got it wrong. I may well be wrong, but when the parkour community have asked for help or a member's asked for help, and I say even pre-member, because we have gone out to bat for loads of people that don't really have any, like in its truest sense of the word, are you a member of Parkour UK, yes or no? We always made that entry point free. We wanted, and if you make parkour happen in this country, you're in, right? If you then want help because a school's kicked you out or won't let you in, or local authorities put a public order on you, or someone's sensationalising in the press, or someone doesn't know what it is, we have always gone out to bat, whether that's advice, guidance, standing shoulder to shoulder. Now, we've never been resourced properly until the last 2 years, and those first 8 with Eugene predominantly acting voluntarily and trying to do the best for like half a day a week. But the hours and the time that individual put in to going out to bat for the community were never really recognised and celebrated for lots of different reasons. But I don't think we've done anything in that decade that I would regret because we didn't stand shoulder to shoulder with the community.
That's good to hear. That's really good to hear. I mean that genuinely, because like I said, there is a bit of a disconnect between these two parts of the parkour community, the instructed and community. I've never met you before. I don't know really who you are, and it sounds very encouraging that you've done a lot of these things that you've done and kind of laid foundations for even more kind of growth and connectivity, really. Do you think other sports can learn from the journey of parkour and learn about how it's developing in the UK and the wider world?
I think modern traditional sport could learn so much, and I think again, I'm proud of the community and what they do here. But again, is this valued? Is it understood? So there are members of the community that work in elite sport because they're teaching Premier League athletes or international sailors to move better. And a great story of one of the members of the community that did some work with British sailing that is always one of the first things that trips off my lips is he just went and showed them how he would move around the boat.
Really?
And they were like, well, we're taught to move around the boat, but you're taught to move around the boat by sailors. So why don't you just have a look how this individual would move around the boat when you're in a high pressure situation out at sea trying to... And so there's little nuggets like that where actually, and this always makes me chuckle, we, the community, our sport and our discipline are probably more fundamental to everybody else's sport than they realise. If you can't move efficiently, you're going to struggle to move around the tennis court. If you can't move efficiently, you're going to struggle to manage your body weight in a rugby union scrum. Now, I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that parkour is the foundation of everything, but you can trace it back. Like the stuff that the community teaches at its most granular basic level is good human movement. And you can't perform at the highest level in any sport without basic good human movement. So there is, and so there's elements where I think we could work smarter with other sports. How do we take the parkour community into every other sport just to say, like, these are the movements that you're doing in tennis, we'll do this. Now, the whole sports science world and the whole quadrupedal movement piece and the kind of calisthenics piece is taken off as well, about managing and moving with your own body. But how do we have a parkour offer to every sport that just says, like, let us come in and help the young people you're teaching play tennis differently, because we'll teach them how to move around the court differently. We'll teach them how to get from A to B differently, just in a bit of a fun sense. So there was definitely a piece in there. There's a piece that is untapped where the community is used in the right sense to sell other people's sport. So my sport is rugby. We came up, the rugby union came up with O2 Touch 3 or 4 years ago, a touch rugby product to get more people playing rugby. Who do they use to sell it? A group of parkour practitioners sponsored by O2, moving and throwing a rugby ball around.
Right.
And there are multiple examples of that. Now, that's not to say that, again, we should be everywhere, but there are so many places where parkour is popping up. I come back to the professional sport example. There's a parkour park at Chelsea's training ground. There's one at Man United's training ground. Really? Because because people are, the Chelsea one I was directly involved with, but they've got a parkour facility in the training ground at Chelsea where the movement coach, which I guess is a new sports science-esque role that's been created in the last 5 years, they are teaching the players how to move around, that kind of stuff. So those are a couple of bits. I also think the community-centric piece and governing bodies, traditional governing bodies, struggle with, are they serving the community? Are they protecting the community? Are they facilitating more of their sport? And it's a tricky divide for lots of them. And I'm not sure they get it right. I'm not sure we get it right. But our foundations for getting it right are closer, because we won't make a decision and we won't go anywhere unless the community wants us to go there. And I stand by that fact. And that's why I come back to the previous answer, right? We've never done anything that have been so anti what the community wanted. And perhaps we haven't trodden across the line a few times, and maybe we should have made a bigger, quicker decision about competition. I don't know. But actually, having the community at the heart of what we do, I think if I look at other sports, they lose that connection. You only need to look at gymnastics as another example. Well, there's two governing bodies already. There's UK gymnastics as the people that don't like British gymnastics, and then there's British gymnastics that've got all the, and that's multiplied in loads of sports. There's loads of examples where the governing body does things so heinously badly, in some people's opinion, that they go and set up another version. Swimming had it. Swimming, some people went off and set up the STA. Tennis have had it, where people have set up a different version of. So actually, this is one of my key messages to the community as I depart. I guess stay together. You can, if you can stay united as a community in the UK and globally. That's the message certainly to Parkour Earth, is that the system won't win. And if you don't want stuff to happen, then don't let it happen and stand up against it. And there have been great examples well outside of my jurisdiction where I know the parkour community have stood up against brands or stood up against things that they didn't believe were right, and used the art and the discipline and the social purpose to elevate the community to a higher standing. Continue to do that. And listen, let's not pretend that everybody loves each other in football and rugby and cricket, or everybody loves each other in the parkour community. You've talked already, unstructured, structured, but there are some shared values in the middle. Like, if you can come back to those shared values, and Dan and Chris Grant and Omar and the existing board and the new board, they can stick true to that and continue to be seen to be listening and understanding and walking in your shoes and understanding where you need help, then I think loads of governing bodies and other sports in this country and beyond can learn so much about what makes parkour and free running so unique.
And how do you feel about Parkour UK going forward then? What do you think of, you mentioned a number of names there. Is Parkour UK in good hands?
The single biggest thing, Sam, that we can all do in life is leave the things that are bestowed upon us in a better place. A home, a workplace, a club, a sport, a team, family, whatever you want to talk about. I am absolutely supremely confident that Parkour UK is in a better place now than it was when I found it and when I was asked to get involved. And the team, the positioning, the resource, the capacity, and assuming everything goes well at the AGM in a couple of weeks, 2 new absolute firecrackers of board members, it's in a great place. The conversations, the insight, the walking in your shoes, the balance between community representative and working in the system. So I'm absolutely gutted in many respects, because the stuff that I've fought for 9 years is now coming to fruition, and I won't get to see that in action.
Yes.
But that's my chapter here is done. And I don't know whether it's a chapter or a New Testament, an Old Testament, or a series or what have you, but we've kind of joked about that. I know that's in a better place. I know the battles have, I hope, been worth it. I hope the people recognise that. And if there is a message for everybody, it's get behind Dan and Chris and Omar on the team and take Parkour UK to the next level, because ultimately they will take you as the community to the next level. And whether it's a gripe or a moan with a school that doesn't like it or doesn't let you in, or a local authority that says this is illegal, or a bigger piece around coach education or street furniture and street design or working in prisons, whatever those things might be, the team can help, and they will help, and they will be resourced appropriately to do that. So I have no doubt that the community and Parkour UK will grow brilliantly in the next 12 to 18 months.
I really like that opening sentiment as well, and it's something that I've been thinking about with my own community in York, is that I don't think I'm far wrong in saying that I've kind of held up the scene for a number of years now, because a lot of our original kind of group have dispersed as it happens in life, you know. And I'm kind of at a point now where I'm thinking, you know, this is my city, this is my place, but I don't want to stay here forever. I want to branch out. I want to take hold of any kind of new opportunity, and I feel that will happen within maybe the next couple of years. But that has given me an urgency and a focus to think that I really do want to leave York in a good place. There's there's a number of just little seeds being planted in different areas. You know, the classes that I teach, the university society, the street rats, the kind of people coming into the city. We've just done a big competition as well, online competition, to try and promote parkour in the north of England, because it's not always spotlighted. So that is I can definitely relate to that feeling, and that I want to leave it in a good place, and leave it, you know, with a community that's kind of strong and thriving, really. That would be a great achievement for me. So yeah, hopefully that will happen. We'll see. I know there's a little jam going on Sunday, and some of my students who are just at that point where they're kind of wanting more, you know, they're wanting to go out into the more kind of brutalist physical world, you know, that they want to go and explore the challenges out in town, and that's great for me. That's really nice to see. So I'm excited for them, excited for that.
I'm pleased to hear it.
Thank you. And so I guess as a final question then, what does the future look like for yourself then? How do you, I know you've got 3 girls now, and you seem like you're in a really good spot, but what do you see going forward then? What do you see as a future for yourself?
Sam, I don't struggle to have a list of things that keep me busy, right? So when I started the Parkour UK journey, I was working in the public sector, and then 6 years ago I kind of took a leap to go out on my own, and now I'm a business owner, a trustee, a non-exec director of a really interesting portfolio of businesses. They connect 2 things, sport and people. Those are the common denominator. And everything in there relates from governance, leadership, apprenticeships, people development, playing it forward to young people, careers advice, inclusion, athlete transition, coach education. So yeah, I'm not going to struggle to replace the time. I've got more than enough to keep me busy. But I hope that, as I said to you earlier on, the elements of what I've taken from the community and what I will still be passionate about, like they won't go away. And being involved in lots of the kind of local initiatives in Essex, particularly in Basildon, and even in Billericay where I live, like I know I will still advocate for, open the doors for, and try and make sure that parkour and free running happens. We put a parkour park on the Olympic cycling park at Hadley. I love taking the girls there. Like, we go there to cycle, we go there to walk, we go there for ice cream, but we'll also go there to play. And I'll always walk past that with a smile, knowing that I kind of had a role in making that happen. So, yeah, won't struggle to keep busy, and won't struggle to continue to give back. Do I see my future in other governing bodies? Perhaps over time, but not in the short term. I've just stepped down from Active Essex after 8 years with them as well. So I've got, I guess, somewhere between 20 and 30 days back a year of time that I can contribute to the other things I'm involved in. So yeah, no immediate plans, but I hope that I have built some rapport and some friendships with people in the community. And as I said a minute ago, I know that I'm leaving Parkour UK in a good place with Dan, Chris and Omar, and with a board that is ready to move towards being high performing. And I will look back with a smile on my face and know that there will be elements of what I've learned that I will take into all the things that I'm involved in moving forward.
And just while it's in my head, for someone listening who's maybe a bit younger and it has maybe stoked the fire in their brain a little bit about the structured side and the governance side of parkour, what would you, if this is something that's really interested them over this conversation, because to be honest, these sort of talks aren't very common, as in with young people and from my understanding, what would you say are the steps for them? You know, what gave you the confidence to kind of develop yourself and go along these lines of your career? Like what what can they do if this is something that they think is really interesting and they want to get behind and support things like Parkour UK and kind of bodies, national bodies. What would you advise to a sort of young person hearing this?
There's a few things really, and a great mentor of mine always talked about PI, which is performance, image, and exposure. And if those are made up of 100%, so performance is 70%, image is 20%, exposure is 10%. Whatever you're doing, like if you can perform really well at that job, that's great. But actually, if you're a bit of a dick in the team, or if you're a bit of a maverick, or you don't fall in line, you can let yourself down on the image piece, right? Because they're like, oh, Sam does a great job, he's a great coach, but actually on social media he's a bit of a numpty. The exposure piece is perhaps the most important 10%. Like whatever the job is, whatever the function is, performance, yes, image, absolutely, turning up on time, wearing the right stuff, falling in line. Exposure is about, like, do I remember this conversation? And I will remember this conversation with you, Sam, because that, like, now we've made a connection and we found something to talk about and we found some mutual ground. But that's about who are the people in life that are you're going to find a way of exposing yourself to know that you're Sam Coppack and this is what you do, or to know that you're Fred Bloggs. So when the opportunity arises for the Development Associates Programme at Parkour UK, when does one of you say to Dan, why don't we have a youth panel? Like, where's the Parkour UK youth panel that's representing the voice of young people, the next generation? And play that down locally. So you talk about your street rats in York. Like, if you're the main man, and then you've got your lieutenants and the people underneath you and your practitioners, like, how are they finding their exposure? How are you playing it forward? How are you giving them a pathway? But how are they, like, reading and listening? Now, I hope there's been some useful nuggets in here, right? But whether it's reading about Covey and the 7 Habits, whether it's listening to a Cynic podcast, whether it's getting inside Black Box Thinking or any of the stuff that Matthew Syed talks about, like, there is so much content out there to allow people to be better human beings. And with that comes, okay, well, I'm going to sit on a board. I'm going to put myself forward to be a trustee. I'd like to be on a panel somewhere that's going to put me out my comfort zone. And whatever that thing might be, right? If this is parkour facing, right? We've all got a personal life journey. So if your grandma had dementia, how could you go and give back to a dementia charity locally where you just get to meet people? And it's not about fusing parkour and dementia, but that's about doing some voluntary work, setting up a social action project, sitting on a board or a panel or a group. There are so many opportunities, and society is tough as it is, right? And do people want to be employed or employable? Well, actually, the thing for me is about go and get yourself out there. And if you need to go and do jobs and things that you might not enjoy to get to where you want to go, if you know where you're going and you've got an idea of your career journey, and I don't mean I want to go and run a company in 20 years' time, but what are the little incremental steps? People running companies would have done the over and above bits now. They'd have exposed themselves to opportunities and groups that have set them outside their comfort zone, have challenged them in everything they do, have made them feel uncomfortable, but they've grown. And if there is one thing that the parkour community has taught me from day one, that you are prepared to be resilient and to be determined and to overcome barriers and challenges. So apply the parkour mindset to jobs, careers, life, societal contribution. I think there is some real synergy there, but put yourselves out there. And I could go into, like, I love talking to young people about careers and aspirations, right? And Dan has done this, right? The Development Associates Programme has nothing to do with me. Dan has set up a programme because he saw some brilliant people come to interview that didn't quite make the cut to be employed but could add value. So the second cohort of the DA's programme is a brilliant free initiative, whereas one of your street rats says, Sam, do you know what? Why don't I combine my A-level PE with parkour with this little project around girls' empowerment? Why don't we go and do something with those disengaged young people in that particular part of York. Like, let's go and do something together. Like, bring the things together and use those ingredients to create something that, allows your image and your exposure to go off the chart. And go, do you know what, that parkour community in York, they did that brilliant thing. They did that absolutely brilliant thing. Yes, they hired the centre, and yes, they paid their bills on time, and yes, they looked after the people that came. But there was a young person that couldn't afford it. There was a mum that needed to join in, so you did the mother and child stuff. But then they went over and above, because they went and presented to the council panel. They went and did a pitch somewhere, or they went and challenged somebody about something that is just for a better social purpose. Sorry, I could go on for a long time about that.
No, don't apologise. I think on that very encouraging, positive note, I think we'll end it there. So I can only say thank you so much for coming on. That was a real pleasure, and it's a shame. I feel, I've only talked to you for an hour, but it's a shame that we've kind of only just met at the end of your time at Parkour UK. So really appreciate your words, highly articulate, and so much to process there. So I'm definitely going to really go back through this podcast and listen carefully. And maybe a few of the listeners will do the same as well. But yeah, Mitch, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure. And I really do wish you the best in what happens next, and for your three girls as well.
Sam, the pleasure was all mine. Delighted to take an hour out of my morning to talk to you. And perhaps on reflection, we should have tried to meet earlier. And that may well have been on my shoulders. But great to meet you. Thank you for everything that you do, and with the podcast as well. And I wish you every success with what you do. And there's hopefully a few nuggets in there for listeners. I'm sure they'll be in their single numbers or tens. They certainly won't be in their thousands to take away and put into practice. But get behind the community, and get behind Parkour UK and continue to grow. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, mate. Thank you very much, listeners. See you on the next one. So, that's the end of the episode. Really hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for sticking around, whether you caught it on YouTube or Spotify. If you did enjoy it, hit subscribe on YouTube and you'll be updated with new episodes. Likewise on Spotify, you can hit follow. As always, I love hearing feedback, good or bad or ugly. So please get in touch, get involved. I want to be part of this community. I want to hear your thoughts. I put a lot of thought, care and work into these episodes. So if you really enjoyed it and want to support me and be a legend, then you can do so with the Buy Me a Coffee link underneath. This means you can give me some sort of donation, anything will do, and that will definitely energise me to make more of these podcasts and produce more content for you guys. Other than that, have a wicked day. Train hard, train safe, train soon.